Welcome back to Wisdom by the Fireside. Tonight's story is about sacrifice, betrayal, redemption, and the mysterious ways life circles back to reward kindness. So, pour your tea, sit by the fire, and listen closely. He broke every rule in the book to help a desperate stranger. She disappeared without a trace, but 3 months later, what he discovered would unravel everything he thought he knew about fate. In the spring of 2012, Paul sat in his office at the First Pioneer Bank of Des Moines, Iowa, sipping lukewarm coffee as the fluorescent lights hummed above. At 38, Paul had everything that resembled success: a glass-paneled corner office, a tidy suit collection, a solid salary, and a reputation built on quiet integrity. But he also had something else, an ache that even he didn't fully understand. Maybe it was the loneliness of too many nights eating microwave dinners in silence, or the guilt of a past he rarely spoke about. Either way, something was missing. That Tuesday afternoon, just past 3 p.m., a woman walked into the branch and changed everything. Her name was Rachel, mid-30s. She wore a red scarf too thin for the April wind and clutched a yellow envelope with trembling fingers. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Behind her, a little boy, maybe 5, held onto her coat and looked up at Paul like he was the last lifeboat on a sinking ship. I need help," she said softly. Rachel wasn't a customer at the bank. Her account had been closed due to repeated overdrafts. She'd been bouncing from shelter to shelter since her ex-husband stopped paying child support. The yellow envelope contained medical bills, eviction notices, and a final disconnect notice from Mid-American Energy. "I'm not asking for charity," she whispered, voice shaking. "I swear I'll pay it back in a week. I just need time." Paul knew the rules. Bank managers weren't allowed to transfer funds without approval, let alone to a closed account. But something about Rachel, her voice, the fear in her eyes, the way she glanced at her son, stirred something dormant in him. He hesitated. His hand hovered over his keyboard. Then he typed in his authorization code, $4,500. Enough to cover the debts, the bills, and keep the lights on. "Thank you," she breathed. "You saved my life." She promised she'd be back in 7 days. Several days passed. Then 10, then 20. Rachel never returned. Calls to the number she'd left went to voicemail. Mail sent to the shelter came back undelivered. Paul's stomach turned colder each day. By the 3rd week, he knew what was coming: an audit. It didn't take long for the compliance team to uncover the unauthorized transfer. Paul was fired quietly but swiftly. Just like that, 15 years of career and credibility gone. No legal charges, but no references either. Banks don't forgive rogue transfers. He told no one the real reason. His friends assumed burnout. His landlord raised his eyebrows. His sister begged him to move back to Cedar Rapids. Paul just said he needed space. But every night, he sat on the edge of his futon, staring at that empty yellow envelope he had kept, asking himself if he had been a fool. 3 months later, he sat at a diner, reading the local paper, trying to distract himself from filling out another underpaid job application. Then something caught his eye. A small piece titled, "Hit and Run Survivor Wakes from Coma." Rachel. Her picture, though more bruised and pale, was unmistakable. She had been hit while crossing the street just 2 days after she left his bank. No ID, no family on record. She lay in a coma at Mercy One Hospital for nearly 90 days. Paul dropped his coffee. His hands shook. He flagged the waitress and asked for the hospital's number. She looked small in the hospital bed. The tubes had been removed and her hair was thinner. But when she opened her eyes and saw him, she smiled. "I knew you'd find me," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Tears welled in Paul's eyes. "You disappeared." "I thought I didn't run," she said. "I was going to sell my engagement ring and return the money. I swear. But I never made it across the street." Paul stayed silent. Her son, Tyler, was being cared for by a kind nurse who had stepped in until the foster system was involved. Paul spent the next weeks visiting every day, even as Rachel relearned how to walk and talk. He helped her with paperwork, found her a part-time lawyer, and made sure she had meals when hospital food didn't cut it. 1 month later, a letter arrived from Arizona. It was addressed to Rachel, care of the hospital. The envelope bore the logo of a law firm, and inside was a letter stating she had been named in the will of a woman she'd once cared for as a home aide, an elderly widow named Virginia Whitaker who had no family. The will, dated and signed, named Rachel and her son as the sole beneficiaries. The inheritance? $4.7 million. Rachel fainted before finishing the second page. In the following weeks, Rachel moved into a modest home just outside Des Moines. She insisted on paying Paul back the $4,500 plus more, but he refused. "You never owed me," he said quietly. But she did more than repay him. She offered him something he hadn't known he'd been missing: a family. By the end of that year, Paul and Rachel were married in a small church on the south side of town. Tyler was the ring bearer, and Rachel, walking steady on her own 2 feet, kissed Paul under a sky streaked with soft pink light. They donated most of the money to a foundation for hit-and-run victims and started a shelter for single mothers. Paul never worked at a bank again. Instead, he helped run the foundation and told their story every time someone said life was unfair. Tonight's story teaches us that a single act of kindness, even one that costs everything, can be the turning point not just for others, but for ourselves. Paul lost a career, but he found purpose. Rachel lost everything, but she was blessed in ways no one could have foreseen. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't make sense until much later. But God works in mysterious timing. He watches those who risk their own peace to save others. And when you least expect it, grace shows up, wrapped in second chances. If the story touched your heart and would like to listen to more like it, you know where to find us.